Okay, this is your 10.2 formative quiz. The answers from 10.2. There are only 10 questions in this section, so follow along. In the equation 4x minus 2 equals 10, the simplest way to isolate the variable is to subtract 2 from both sides. The answer is false. One of the easiest ways would simply be to add 2 to both sides, not subtract 2. But as an enrichment part, I do not only have to add 2 to both sides. That is one way to get the answer. I could divide by 4 if I wanted to, but the trick is you don't divide just this by 4. If I was thinking about a scale and I had a box and a triangle and a circle and those two were equal, I can't simply use half a box and half a circle and make them equal. I would also have to have half a triangle, and then they would be equal, whatever the weight of all those were. So technically, if I was to divide all of these by 4, I would be able to solve it. Now before I do that, let's just see what the answer is. So if I was to add 2 to both sides, I get 4x equals 12. I would divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 3. So we know the solution is x equals 3. Now watch what happens when we divide everything in the equation by 4 as opposed to it. So 4x divided by 4 will be x. Negative 2 divided by 4 is negative half, or 0.5. And $10 divided between 4 people would be 2.5 or $2.50 each. When I then go on to isolate the variable here, I have a one-step equation, which I would add 0.5 to both sides, and I have x equals 3, which is the solution the first time I did it, but it's a different way to get the answer. So, although this is enrichment, and you don't have to know this, it's good if you do understand it. Question 2 says the value of x in the equation, a negative fifth of x minus 3 equals 1 will be negative. Well, in order to find that out, I have to actually solve it. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. A negative fifth of x equals 4. Multiply both sides by negative 5. And x will equal negative 20. So the answer is true. It will be negative. In question 3, the most efficient first step in the equation 13 equals negative 5x plus 2 is to subtract 13 from both sides. The answer is false. Probably one of the easiest ways is simply to subtract 2 from both sides, not 13. In question 4, to isolate the variable in the equation 4x minus 1 equals 1, you would likely use addition and multiplication. Well, for sure, I would use addition to get rid of the constant. But the problem is, on the next step, I would not use multiplication. I would actually use division. And because I would use division, it's false, and I would have to change that to division. In question 5, it says simply solve using opposite operation. So in this two-step equation, the first thing I'm going to get rid of is adding 2 to both sides. I get 2x equals 4. Divide by your coefficient, and x will equal 2. That's a pretty easy question. That's really from grade 7. Question 6 is still a grade 7 question. I would add 5 to both sides. I get 4x equals 4. Divide both sides by 4, and x equals 1. Did it say to model for these ones? No. Okay. Question 7 is still a grade 7 question. So the first thing I would do is subtract 1. Subtract 1 from both sides. A negative fifth of x equals negative 5. Then I would multiply both sides by 5. And x would equal negative 25. Rushing because I only have a couple minutes left. This is a good example of a grade 8 question. I would add 2 to both sides first. I get a negative half of x equals 4. Multiply both sides by negative 2. And x will equal negative 8. Question 9. The trick to the question 9 is when you look at it. Oh, please, Lord, let this. There we go. What is your constant? Anybody? 5. What is your coefficient? It's not 2. Negative 2. So by subtracting 5 from both sides, I end up with negative 2x Yes. Equals negative 16. Divide both sides by negative 2, and x will equal 8. Remember that in this equation, negative 2 is your coefficient. And in the last example, subtract 3 from both sides. Shh. Here's the trick part. What's your coefficient? Negative 10. If you divide both sides by negative 10, x will equal, well, 1 divided by 10 is really a tenth, right? A tenth. So it's going to be a positive tenth, or simply 0.1.